I remember walking out of the hotel of Dallas, where we were in Dallas, walking out of the hotel, and a basketball team was arriving as we were walking out of the hotel, and they were literally walking out of the bus. And one of the coaches, who I recognized as the former coach of the Clippers, Alvin Gentry, was like one of the first people off the bus. And we were walking out of the hotel, and the look on his face, he literally said, "Oh my God." Like, it wasn't loud, but it was audible, where he walked out of the bus, and we were walking past the bus to go to our car, and he saw her. I don't know if he knew who she was or not, but he just looked at her and was like, "Oh my God." And she just kind of giggled and smiled and walked past. Welcome to the Weekly Transit, your guide to understanding the current planetary and astral alignments. Together, we'll explore how to harness these cosmic frequencies, empowering you to reach your highest potential as you navigate the days ahead. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. Welcome to the Weekly Transit. This is the week of February 10th to the 16th, with the theme of the week. The theme of the week is unconscious awareness and releasing pride, as we highlight only four transits this week. Last week was 11. That felt like a mouthful. That was a lot. It felt like a lot, not only in the podcast, but it felt like a lot living it through the week. How did it feel to you? I mean, this week we've got the full moon in Leo. That's the releasing pride part. We've got Mercury transiting into Pisces. That's unconscious awareness, because Mercury is the planet of consciousness. Pisces is the unconscious. So we're becoming aware of our unconscious thoughts. But how was last week with those 11 transits? A lot of tension. There was the half moon. There was Mars squaring Chiron, the second of 3 times that's occurring. How was that for you? I'm curious to know. I like hearing from you. I like to know how the week has gone for you, how the planets and stars have influenced you, affected you. I'll try to get back to you if I can. Just because I don't, or if I don't, it doesn't mean that I'm not reading them. I don't care. I do care. I love hearing from you, especially when you're sharing with me how the podcast is supporting you, empowering you, helping guide you through the week. It was a tense week for me. First of all, like, I had heard from a lot of people listening to the podcast that, there were some gaps, there were some glitches, the sound seemed to disappear at certain times, and that really freaked me out, because I spend so much time editing the podcast, too much time editing the podcast. Not going to spend this much time editing the podcast anymore. Last week was that lesson where I ended up, just after I had heard that from so many people, I'm like, okay, well then I'm just going to upload the raw audio. And that's what I'm going to do from now on, because I've realized that I don't care. I think it's my 6th house stellium. I get overly controlling about everything needing to be perfect. Ooh, I made a smacking sound with my lips, or, oh, that breath was too, that sound. Ooh, I don't like that. But you know what? Now I don't care. I don't care. I hope you don't care. I hope it doesn't bother you. I hope you still enjoy the sound of my voice. I hope it's soothing to you. I hope it's peaceful to you. I hope it brings you peace and clarity, listening to what we have to share here on the Weekly Transit. Because ultimately, I'm here to support and guide you through this podcast, but at the same time, I need to protect my own output, that I'm putting into it, because the last thing that I want to feel is drained by the podcast. I want to feel energized by the podcast, which I do when I'm actually recording it. I feel drained by the editing process. So I'm going to scale that back. I'm going to scale that back. And I'm going to release the control. And I'm going to be more peaceful with the output, just as I feel peaceful in recording. So, how was the week for you? A lot of transits, 11 transits. This week, just 4. But we got a lot to get into, because I'm going to talk about the 2 Jessicas, Jessica Alba, Jessica Simpson, both of them going through separations or divorces from their husbands. Both of these women have crossed my path in the past, or maybe I crossed their path. With Jessica Alba, we sort of walked the path together for a certain period of time, over a 2-year period, multiple times. I'm excited to share some of those stories. Both amazing women. Interesting women that have given me perspective and understanding of myself, just as everyone does. And I'm so fascinated by people. There is nothing more interesting to me about this earth than the people who inhabit this place. That's why I love doing what I do, because when I do a reading for someone, I'm like, wow, that's you. That's your astrological code. And when people say, oh my God, that's me, that's exactly what you're sharing is me. How do you know that about me? Wow, so cool. And I'm loving doing these interviews with the weekly transit. I hope you're enjoying them. Last week was Mark Erickson, the multi-talented Gemini rising Mark Erickson, CEO by day of the company he founded, Total Body Fitness, installing home gyms in private homes, in apartment complexes, hotels, offices. And by night, a very talented singer-songwriter who has been mentored by Neil Sedaka. A talented actor who was chosen by Stephen King to be Jack Torrance in the stage production of The Shining. Wow. What an amazing individual. The week before that was a fellow Pisces. Mark's a Pisces sun, Pisces moon, Gemini rising. The week before that was Aline Hashatorian, my Armenian sister. Pisces sun, Virgo moon, Leo rising. We talked a lot about Armenia and astrology, of course. Aline is amazing. Very creative individual. Works for a company called Moons Creative. Moons. Astrology. The week before that was Alicia Ace Easter. Wow. The vulnerability of the people that have come on the show is really inspiring to me. Mark lost his father at a very young age. Ace lost her mother when she was 19, a freshman in college. Now she's an incredibly successful entrepreneur, a yoga instructor, a life coach, a podcaster, a Reiki master. So inspirational, so inspiring, Ace. The week before that was Drew Marish, who tragically lost his son. His son was, I think, 19 years old. Drew has lived a very interesting life, and he is committed to sharing his story through his podcast, Unpacking Grief, He's very open about sharing his experience and wants to help others who have maybe suffered through similar experiences. I really appreciate Drew for what he shared on the podcast. Of course, the week before that was the incredible Ricky King, the astrologer Ricky King, who tragically lost her brother when she was in her early 20s. She shared about that, but also shared her inspiring story of being a mother. Going from working in retail to becoming a professional astrologer. That's inspiring. The week before that was Delisa Hawking, the talented psychic, who I am actually going to be connecting with again this week, this Tuesday, February 11th at 2:45 p.m. Pacific or 5:45 p.m. Eastern on YouTube live with Delisa, covering the astrology for the week. Delisa is a 5th generation psychic. She shared a lot about her story and how she had her psychic awakening. She shared about that on the weekly transit. We've collaborated several times, and Delisa is very interested in astrology, and she is starting her own weekly astrology live on YouTube and inviting different astrologers on there to highlight some of the stories that are going on in the news in this crazy world that we're living in, to give some astrological clarity. And I'm going to be on with Delisa on Tuesday, February 11th at 2:45 p.m. Pacific, 5:45 p.m. Eastern. Join us. I will put the link to the YouTube in the show notes. So let's get into the week here. Well, before we get into the week, let's talk about, let's talk about Jessica Alba, Jessica Simpson. And also, if you're enjoying the podcast, if you are getting something out of this podcast, rate and review us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on whatever platform you're listening on. All of your engagement helps the podcast. And I'm so grateful for your help, your support. If you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, you can do so via Spotify or Donor Box. The links to do so are in the show notes. Subscribe to the podcast. Okay, enough of all that, asking you what to do. Let's get into Jessica Simpson first. So it came out recently that Jessica Simpson is separating from her husband, Eric Johnson, the football player. Eric Johnson. Apparently, Jessica and Eric Johnson were married began dating in January of 2010 and married on July 5th, 2014 at the San Ysidro Ranch in Montecito, Santa Barbara County, California. Wow, let me tell you about the San Ysidro Ranch. I have a friend who had his 40th birthday at the San Ysidro Ranch, and it was impressive. The first time I went to the San Ysidro Ranch was breakfast there with my uncle, who is a wealthy man. And this was back in I'd say the early 1990s. There was about 10 of us at breakfast, and it's one of these places where you go and there's no prices on the menu, because if you have to ask, then you shouldn't be there. And he told me that he's like, you know how much the orange juice costs for breakfast? This is the early 1990s. I was like, how much? $80. So I had a friend who had his 40th birthday party there. That was a very special event. And that's where Jessica Simpson married Eric Johnson. I met Jessica Simpson back in the early 2000s when she was with Nick Lachey. I was working in publicity, and my boss represented Jessica Simpson. Jessica's sister Ashlee is a big reason why I quit publicity. And the other reason is my trip with Jessica Alba to Europe, and nothing wrong with these people. It's just those moments in life where you get the clarity where you're like, wow, this is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not where I'm supposed to be. So I'll get to those stories in a minute. But first, Jessica Simpson, I never really interacted with her too much. Maybe just some of her representatives. But there was a weekend where my boss couldn't make it to a photo shoot. Jessica was shooting several covers of Us Weekly. They were doing, I don't know, maybe 6 or a dozen different photo shoots for her for various covers that they were planning to use for her throughout the year, because she's very popular, especially in the early 2000s. And so I went up to this house. It might have been the Pacific Palisades or Malibu, maybe just north of the Palisades in Malibu. I wonder if this home is still there. I actually thought about it during the fires, but it is this really amazing mansion, just on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. And drove up there, very humbled by just the locale, driving up in my Honda to this multi-million-dollar mansion. It's like, what am I doing here? In my Honda. All of these hair and makeup stylists, all these people, a lot of people from Us Weekly. Very tense environment. We got to get the right shot. And you know me, I'm pretty laid back, though I can be very intense myself. And so maybe that's why I'm in this situation around all these tense people, because I'm tense too. Even though I'm laid back, I'm also tense or intense, passionate. And Jessica was exactly how you would think she would be. She was very sweet, very kind. She's a Cancer sun, a Cancer moon, so very, very kind. But also just kind of has that spaciness about her. And I look at her chart and I wonder, what is that spaciness about her? Because there were a couple moments where she's asking questions about, I know there was that famous one that she did in the show that she had, the reality show that she had with Nick Lachey, where it was buffalo chicken, thinking that it was from a buffalo or something like that. I had a moment like that, not directly with her at this photo shoot, but I was standing nearby when somebody was talking about a mobile, one of those little things that hang above. I probably sound like an idiot right now, because do I even know what I'm talking about? It's one of those things that hang above a crib, a mobile, and it hangs above a crib, and there's different figurines that hang off of this little thing that hangs above the crib, and the baby can look up at it and be like, oh wow, look at that, it's so cool. keeps the baby entertained. And somebody was like, oh yeah, I have one of those, and there's a bunch of nymphs on it. And Jessica said, nymphs, is that like a nymphomaniac? And everyone was like, no, Jessica, it's not a nymphomaniac. It's different than a nymphomaniac. But it was hilarious just to hear her say that. She said that I looked like her cousin Clayton or Clay. You remind me of my cousin Clay or Clayton. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like that. Daddy, doesn't he remind you of cousin Clay? Oh yeah, I guess so. I kind of see it. Sure. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, nice. And so I look like family to you. Cool. I like that. Thanks, Jessica. I remember her dad was wearing a very expensive watch, and he is he's like, all right, got to get to work right now. Let's get to work. Let's get to work right now. And I was like, wow, okay, pushing his daddy's little girl to get up there, look pretty, and smile for the camera. So that was my experience with Jessica Simpson. Really nice, very kind. She's a Scorpio rising. You know, where does that airiness come for her? Maybe it's because she was born with Mercury conjunct the sun, and Mercury rules Gemini, and Gemini is an air sign. So if you're born with Mercury conjunct the sun, even if you're a Cancer sun like Jessica, you're also like a Gemini. And I feel like Geminis they're the sign that is the intellectual and the airhead. Those are the twins. One twin is the intellectual. The other twin is the airhead. And so I don't for a minute think that Jessica Simpson is dumb or unintelligent. I think she's very bright, but she also has this other side of her personality which can come off as very ditzy. And I think it might be because Mercury is conjunct her sun. Her moon is also squaring her Mars. Her moon is in Cancer, squaring her Mars in Libra. And so that may also bring about that airiness. So maybe it has something to do with that. And then the Scorpio rising. Like there's something about her we just don't know. So looking at her husband or soon-to-be ex-husband, Eric Johnson's chart and how the two of them connect, his sun's at 21 degrees in Virgo. His Mercury is at 23 degrees in Virgo. That aligns with her sun and her Mercury. So I imagine they had some strong communication in their relationship. His Saturn is aligning with her sun. That indicates commitment. Her Saturn is aligning with his sun in conjunction with his sun. So this feels like a strong, very strong committed relationship. Though his Saturn is squaring her Venus, and maybe there is some tension happening there, his Saturn is forming a trine to her Chiron. This is a relationship that involves healing. Not quite sure where his moon is. It's in Cancer somewhere like hers. So they're reflecting that Cancer frequency. They're both very emotional, maybe moody people. His moon might be squaring her Pluto, which can be very intense. Maybe that is the trigger point between the two of them. I don't know. We don't really know unless we have the time. But, you know, thinking about where things are right now and like, why is Jessica Simpson going through this? You know, Uranus is transiting through her 7th house, the planet of revolution in the house of marriage. It's been transiting through her 7th house for the last several years. I mean, we got to go back to, 2023 is when it started moving into her 7th house. Chiron. You know, we talked about Chiron a few weeks ago when we were highlighting Megan Fox and the challenge that she's experiencing in her relationship with Machine Gun Kelly. Chiron's at 19 degrees in Aries. It's been at 19 degrees since November 11th. It's going to remain at 19 degrees until this week, February 14th. Valentine's Day is when it finally moves to 20 degrees. But Chiron first touched 19 degrees back in, it's like April of 2023. So for the last almost 2 years, Chiron has been dancing around this degree. And that degree squares Jessica's sun at 18 degrees in Cancer and her Mercury at 20 degrees in Cancer. So she is facing some deep insecurities regarding the desires of her heart and how she identifies in terms of her home life, her family life, her future outlook. Saturn is aligning with her sun, so she's needing to take responsibility in terms of who she is. Chiron's opposing her Pluto, so she's going through a transformation of her self-confidence. It's transiting through her 5th house, which is associated with the 5th sign, which is Leo, which is the heart. She was born with Pluto in Libra, so it's a transformation of her relationship energy. And it's aligning in a trine with her North Node in Leo in the 9th house, which all I have to say to you, Jessica Simpson, if you're listening, remember me? I'm like your cousin Clay. Is that his name? I don't remember. Wade? Something like that. But all I have to say to you, Jessica, with this Chiron aligning with your North Node in Leo in the 9th house, is follow your heart. Follow your joy. Do what makes you feel expansive. Do what brings laughter to your soul. Where you feel it in your entire body. You feel laughter. You feel joy. You feel jubilation. Face whatever fears and insecurities that you have to feel joy. To feel joyous. Now moving on to Jessica Alba. Well, before I go to Jessica Alba, let me tell you my Ashlee Simpson story. So it's really interesting, how small of a town Hollywood is. When you live in LA for long enough and you work in restaurants or you work in the Hollywood business, like it's really a small town. Because Ashlee Simpson, I met Ashlee Simpson, that was back in 2003. No, 2004. It was early 2004. And shortly thereafter, I'd say about 2 years later, I ended up meeting her future husband, Evan Ross, Diana Ross's son. I used to work with Tracy Ellis Ross, one of my coworkers at my publicity company where I worked, represented Tracy Ellis Ross. So I sometimes covered Tracy Ellis Ross on some photo shoots. Fellow Scorpio, amazing woman. I ended up working in this restaurant after publicity. And at the restaurant that I worked at, a lot of Hollywood people would come in there. Diana Ross would come in there. Tracy Ellis Ross would come in with her mom. She introduced me to her mom. She remembered me from publicity. And her little brother, Evan Ross, would come in there as well. He was friends with one of the owners. So I saw him all the time. But Ashlee Simpson, it was 2003. And in 2003, Ashlee Simpson was 19 years old. And the same woman who represented Tracy Ellis Ross also represented Ashlee Simpson. And one afternoon, she reached out to me and said, I have another event I'm covering. I can't make it to this event that Ashlee's going to It's a rock the vote event. She has to do a TSA PSA public service announcement, telling everyone, encouraging everyone to rock the vote, to get out and vote. It was at the Hollywood Palladium, a very iconic music venue on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. And I said, sure, yeah, of course, I'll cover it. She's like, it's not going to be hard. You just have to, get her down the tiny red carpet. It's going to be small. Just make sure she does the PSA and then you can leave. Okay, simple enough. So I go to the Palladium, and I go to where you're supposed to enter. I tell them my name. They're like, who are you? I'm like, this is my name. I'm Scott Tajarian. They look on the list. They're like, you're not on the list. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be on the list because so-and-so told me that I'm going to be on the list because I'm here to meet Ashlee Simpson. And they're like, well, you must be on the other list over there. So I go over there to these other people and I tell them, hey, the people over there said I'm on the list over here. I'm Scott Tajarian. Like, who? No, you're not on this list. Check the list over there. Like, I was just over there. Well, you're not here, so go over there. So I go there, back and forth. And finally, I'm calling my work associate. I'm telling her. She's like, I don't know. You're supposed to be on the list. Ashlee's on her way. She's got a wristband for you. Don't worry. I'm like, well, how do I get past the security? And finally, I was just like, whatever, I'm going past you. I'm walking past you. Here comes Ashlee. I'm going to her, and that's it. You're not going to stop me. So I walked past them. I go up to Ashlee. Hi, Ashlee. I'm Scott. Your publicist asked me to meet you here, and you have a wristband for me. So she hands me a broken wristband that her friend had ripped off of his wrist so I could put on my wrist. I'm just put it on around my wrist, holding through like the cuff link of my suit, my dress shirt. And I walk her down this little red carpet. And then inside she does the PSA. And then we go inside to the venue where there's music playing and so on and so forth. And I'm about to leave and I'm about to say goodbye to her. And she's like, can you get us some apple teenies? Like, oh my God, wow. Okay, yeah, sure, So I go and get some apple teenies for her and her young friends. They're all 19 years old. And I'm like, I'm pimping booze for underage millionaires. Like, this is my job. Why am I doing this? I went home that night to my apartment and off of Runyon Canyon, right in the middle of Hollywood, and told my roommate, I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this publicity anymore. I can't do it anymore. I got to get out of this. This is not for me. And it was coming on the heels of my experiences with Jessica Alba, which were quite good. I met Jessica a couple years before. She was also working with my boss, and we connected several times over the years that I was working in publicity. She was very friendly to me. She felt to me like a sister or a good friend. And, it was confusing to me after I left publicity because I thought I would stay in touch with her and we would stay connected in some way. But we didn't. I reached out to her several times, probably like a crazed stalker, and finally got the message that she wasn't going to call me back. And so I stopped. But when I was working with her, we had a really good relationship and a lot of fun. I was with her on her 21st birthday. I set up her 21st birthday in Vegas. The hotel, the dinners, the club, backstage at Cirque du Soleil. I got a host in Vegas to show us around and get us hooked up everywhere. And it wasn't just me and her. It was her whole family, her cousin, her parents, I think her brother was there, and her manager. It was a really fun time. and a memorable time. And I had traveled to Dallas and Detroit, helping her with press for her first film, Honey. She invited me to ride in a limo with her and her manager and her agent to go around to all the different theaters on the night that the film opened, to kind of, sneak in and see how the audience was receiving the film. It was so much fun. She invited me over to her house to watch an early cut of the film. I went to Europe with her to do publicity for the film. And that was a really funny story. We got on the plane to go to Europe, and we were in first class on Air Lufthansa. And we get up there and we're not sitting together. And she's like, oh, you need to, whoever's sitting here, just sit next to me. And then whoever's sitting here, we'll tell them to sit someplace else. And we see who's getting on the plane, and it's the cast of Lord of the Rings. And she's like, well, as long as it's not Viggo Mortensen. And of course, whose seat was it? Viggo Mortensen's. But she's like, no, I'm just kidding. Ask him to sit in your seat. And I asked him. He's like, oh, yeah, cool. No worries. He's a super cool guy. Viggo Mortensen's another guy. It's like, wow, I've run into him multiple times over the years, and he remembers me. Such a generous man. The first time I saw him was when I was working at a restaurant before I worked publicity. And then I saw him again at an event during the height of Lord of the Rings. The publicity company I was working at was a private event where oh my god, what's her name? Is it the Fugees? The Fugees? Who are the Fugees? That's, Lauryn Hill was playing a private event that was for some benefit. And he showed up and he was like, do I have to do press? And I'm like, I'll get you in the back. And he's like, you look familiar to me. And I was like, yeah, I waited on you when you came to the restaurant at LAX, that weird spaceship-looking restaurant. He's like, I was like, you were wearing a Vote for Jesse Jackson 1984 t-shirt. He's like, I was with my son, wasn't I? I was like, I think so. And another woman. He's like, yes, I remember you. And then he was on the plane with Jessica and I to Frankfurt, Germany. And he invited us to go to the Lord of the Rings premiere in London. But we were leaving the day of the premiere, so we couldn't go. But he was a very kind man, very nice. So went to Germany with Jessica. We stayed in the same hotel where Michael Jackson dangled his baby off the side of the balcony. That famous video from back in the day. That's where we stayed, next to the Brandenburg Gate. It was in December, and I got to go to like the Christmas markets, which were amazing, in Berlin, Germany. That's where we were. We flew to Frankfurt first and then Berlin. And yeah, it was an incredible time. I remember walking back to the hotel, and these young girls were standing at the bottom of the hotel, and they were screaming, Jessica Alba, Jessica Alba, hoping that she would like come out the window or something. Like, they didn't even know like where, what part of the hotel she was staying in. But I was like, wow, this is so weird. I was like, so this is the height of my experience here. I'm on a trip to Europe with Jessica Alba, first class, great food, first class hotel, first class airfare. Jessica's cool, but I don't feel fulfilled in what I'm doing. This doesn't feel good to me. And when I was in Detroit with her, I got really sick. And, I always mention this book, Heal Your Body. And I was just looking this up today. Dysentery. Because, wow. Because I had dysentery. I got dysentery when I went to Detroit with Jessica Alba for her honey tour. We went to a Thai restaurant, and after that food, I got really sick. I wasn't throwing up, but I just got really bloated and flew back to LA. And Jessica was always like, it wasn't the Thai place. You were eating those nuts in the limo on the way back from the airport to my house. And that's what got you sick. You shouldn't have been eating those nuts. And who knows where they had been or who had touched them. Okay, maybe she was right. Might have been that. But I was feeling kind of sick back in Detroit. And then a few days later, I was at a photo shoot with her. And I'm like, I've gained 10 pounds. I haven't had a bowel movement since Dallas. And just to, give you some insight into how special these women are, like Jessica Simpson, Jessica Alba. Like Jessica Alba, I can't really speak. I mean, Jessica Simpson is incredible. I didn't spend a lot of time with her, obviously, but Jessica Alba I spent a lot of time with, and when you see how people react to a celebrity like this, it really gives you insight into their power, their charisma. Like, I feel like if Jessica wasn't famous, Jessica Alba, if she wasn't famous, she would still get this reaction where people are just kind of drawn to her. And she is a Leo rising, so she has that energy of the sun in her personality. She, like Jessica Simpson, they're both ninth house suns. Jessica Alba was born with Mercury conjunct the sun, just like Jessica Simpson in the ninth house. But Jessica Alba is a Taurus sun. Jessica Simpson is a Cancer sun. Jessica Alba is a sixth house moon in Aquarius. Marilyn Monroe was a Leo rising and an Aquarius moon. Just like Jessica Alba. But I had these experiences with Jessica Alba where I was able to see how she affected people. It was really like, wow. So I mentioned Dallas. I remember walking out of the hotel of Dallas, where we were in Dallas, walking out of the hotel, and a basketball team was arriving as we were walking out of the hotel, and they were literally walking out of the bus. And one of the coaches who I recognized as the former coach of the Clippers, Alvin Gentry, was like one of the first people off the bus. And we were walking out of the hotel, and the look on his face, he literally said, "Oh my God." Like, it wasn't loud, but it was audible. Where he walked out of the bus, and we were walking past the bus to go to our car, and he saw her. I don't know if he knew who she was or not, but he just looked at her and was like, "Oh my God." And she just kind of giggled and smiled and walked past, One of the funniest times was when we were at the ESPN Awards, which was at the Hollywood and Highland Complex, which is where they have the Oscars every year. And this was for the ESPY Awards. That's what they call it, the ESPN ESPY Awards. And this was in 2003, I think. And LeBron James was just a mere high schooler. He was like 19 years old. We were sitting inside the Hollywood and Highland Complex. I was sitting next to Jessica, and LeBron James and a few of his buddies were walking past, And they were just like a bunch of high schoolers. Like, they reminded me of me and my friends when we were in high school and we were walking past a really attractive girl. They were just walking by, looking at her like a bunch of dogs that were just staring at somebody, just like, oh my God, who is that? Or like, they know who she was, obviously. But they were enamored. And she was just kind of like leaned over to me and was like, who are those guys? I was like, that's LeBron James. Like, he's a high school basketball player who's going to be probably one of the greatest basketball players that's ever lived. And she's like, okay. But then the funniest one was when we were walking up the stairs at the Hollywood and Highland complex, and we were walking up the stairs, and coming down the stairs was Luke Walton, who ended up becoming LeBron James's coach of the Lakers, Richard Jefferson, who played with Luke Walton at Arizona. He's, I think, now an analyst, but all these guys are professional basketball players at the time that we saw them. And Baron Davis, who is another famous, really talented basketball player who went to UCLA and played a number of years in the NBA. Those three guys were walking down the steps as we were walking up. And they literally tripped over themselves and stumbled down the stairs as they saw Jessica walking up the stairs towards them. They were falling over themselves. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. They were falling over themselves. They were stumbling. They were looking at her. They're like, oh my God, oh my God. Yeah, they were just like, why? They made such a scene, and she was just like laughing and giggling and just kept walking past. So that's the effect of Jessica Alba. And it was fun to be around. But I don't know, like, I was in Detroit and I was getting sick and I had dysentery. And so I mentioned this book, Heal Your Body, and I look up dysentery. I just saw this the other day. I'm like, oh wow, I should bring that up when I'm talking about Jessica Alba. And it says about dysentery, fear and intense anger. Fear and intense anger. That's exactly how I felt in these situations. I felt afraid and I felt angry. And the anger was mine, but it also wasn't mine. It's kind of like what I was talking about last week when I was mentioning being at that wedding and the insecurities that I was feeling, that they were mine, but they were also being brought up by the insecurities of the people around me. And I feel like being 20 years removed from the epicenter, having lived in the epicenter of the Hollywood machine, I can see how there's a lot of fear and anger there. People mention a lot, you'll hear online, that like Hollywood's this demonic place and it's evil and there's sorcery going on there. And that very well may be true. I'm not saying all the people there are like that. I don't think they are. There's some really nice people there. I've met really nice, good people there. But there is a frequency there that is rooted in some kind of maybe demonic sorcery where insecurities run really high. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of, like covering your own ass and not taking responsibility for yourself or holding yourself accountable. People can be really cutthroat. It can be a dark place. And me being an empathic as I am, took that on. And I numbed myself with drugs and alcohol to insulate myself from what I was feeling. Is incredibly intense. And so I came back from that trip in Detroit, and I remember I went to a photo shoot and I was like, Jessica, I haven't had a bowel movement in since Dallas. I've gained 10 pounds. And she's like, you're almost going to be 30. That's all that it is. And then Wow, I guess I'm going to get really graphic here. I was supposed to go on another trip with Jessica to Atlanta, and I had to tell my boss that I couldn't go because my scrotum had ballooned up. It was like a blowfish that blows up, and I was like, I really want to go. I appreciate the opportunity. I love Jessica and the job and everything, but I don't want to be at 30,000 feet cruising altitude, and I don't want my family jewels to explode somewhere at 30,000 feet. I need to go to the hospital right now. I need to go to the emergency room and check out what's going on here. And when I went to the emergency room at Cedars-Sinai and they ran all the tests, they did an ultrasound, they did a CAT scan, an x-ray, they did everything, and then blood work. And finally they came back and they're like, "You've got dysentery." And I was like, "Dysentery? What?" And so they gave me some antibiotics, and I ran to the bathroom and so cleared it all out. But yeah, just looking back at that, I was holding in a lot of anger and a lot of fear. And it literally had to be released in the hospital. Me running half naked with my gown to the, to the bathroom in the hospital. What an experience. And then it was literally 4 months later. Actually, I took 2 weeks off the end of the year to kind of reassess what I was doing with my life. And then the Ashlee Simpson thing just was the straw that broke the camel's back. And literally the next week I went into my boss's office and said, "Thanks for the job. I'm leaving. And yeah, I'll stick around till you find a replacement, and that's it." And that was one of the craziest things I ever did in my life. People were like, "Are you insane? You've got a great job. What are you doing? You get to rub shoulders or elbows with all these famous rich people, and you're just going to throw that all away to do what? Because you want to be a writer? You're going to go back to waiting tables?" And that was a hard experience. I had some panic attacks after that. That's a whole nother story. I've talked long enough about myself. Let's talk about Jessica and what's going on with her chart. So she's experiencing Saturn transiting through her 7th house. And Saturn's been transiting through her 7th house since 2023. So it's interesting. As Uranus entered Jessica Simpson's 7th house, and the 7th house is the house of marriage, Saturn's been transiting through Jessica's 7th house. So the planet of revolution is going through Simpson's house of marriage, and the planet of restriction is going through Alba's house of marriage. Jessica Alba is also experiencing Chiron transiting through her 8th house. The 8th house is the house of death, karmic bonds. Chiron moved into Jessica Alba's 7th house back in 2011. So let's think back. So Jessica Alba married Cash Warren in 2008. I remember when she met Cash Warren. I never met him, but I remember her telling me about him on the phone. She was on a film shoot, The Fantastic Four, and she was giddy. She's like, "I met this guy." When I met her, she was with Michael Weatherly. And then I was working with her when they broke up. And so I felt like I was a person who was there supporting her through that breakup, and then encouraging her as she was connecting with her new serious romance, which was Cash Warren. And so that was in 2008. And a couple years later, well, '08 is when she married him, but she met him much earlier. Let's see what the Wikipedia says. Yeah, they met during '04. Yeah, exactly. And that's when I left the company, was in April of '04. So, but in 2011, that's when Chiron, or 2010 is when Chiron started moving through her 7th house. So wounded and insecurity to marriage. And then in 2017, it moved into her 8th house. That's wounded insecurity to intimacy. And now it's completing its transit there through the 8th house. Neptune is in the 8th house for Jessica Alba. So reimagining the dream of what it means to be intimate with others. This last year, she was last couple years, experiencing her Neptune square Neptune. That was back in 2023. That's a big reimagination period. But really, that's Saturn transiting through the 7th house. And it's going to intensify this year for her. If I was in contact with her, she probably has no idea what I'm doing nowadays. But I knew nothing of astrology really back when I knew Jessica Alba. But Saturn over the next year is going to square her Neptune. So I would just tell her, look, like, you've got to take responsibility for what you want in your relationships, what you're willing to give in return. And you need to reimagine the dream in terms of what it means to be intimate with another person. Chiron is opposing her Pluto. It's opposing Jessica Simpson's Pluto. It's opposing Jessica Alba's Pluto as well. So going through that transformation of self-confidence and what it means to be in a relationship, being authentic in relationship. So Pluto is a big one. Pluto is squaring Jessica Alba's Mars. So this is a really intense, transformative period in terms of her sense of freedom, in terms of her material security and taking action to be free, going through a transformation of her daily routine, her health, her diet, her work environment. That's all happening as well. And so let's look at Cash Warren and Jessica Alba. What is their connection? He was born with the moon in Gemini. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what time he was born, so it's hard to say, but his Mercury is aligning with Jessica's Mars. Okay, so they have some communication strength there. His Sun is aligning with her Chiron in a positive way, so there is some healing. This relationship is about healing. Her Saturn is aligning with his Venus in a positive way, so that indicates the commitment. His Saturn is aligning with her Venus in a positive way. So his Venus is aligning with her Saturn in a positive way. His Saturn is aligning with her Venus in a positive way. So that's the commitment there. That's the commitment. But I'm just missing, I like to see Mars aligning with Venus or with the moon or with the sun. I don't see that. So maybe they're missing some of that chemistry. I don't know. It really, it's important to have the other person's time of birth too, so we can see where the planets land. But yeah, I can see why they've been committed, but also, if they're missing aspects between the sun and the moon, or the sun and Venus, or the sun and Mars, or the moon and Mars, then it's hard to keep the chemistry rolling. So his Jupiter is conjunct her North Node, so he is expanding her soul's purpose She was born with the North Node in Leo in the 12th house, so obviously she's following her soul's purpose to be the queen of fantasy. And I've clearly seen how she has been the fantasy of so many, just idealized. Wow, people just falling over themselves to get a glimpse of Jessica Alba, men and women alike. So I hope this has been educational for you and interesting for you. I know I've spoken for quite some time here, but I'm just relaxing into the conversation. We've already been talking for an hour, and now let's get into the transits and see what's going on this week. But I'm always curious to hear how what I'm sharing, is this resonating with you? Is it helpful to you? Is hearing about my personal experiences, is it something that interests you, or do I sound like a self-indulgent prick talking about my stories with Jessica Alba and Jessica Simpson? God, I hope not. I truly am sharing everything to humanize myself, but to also give perspective of the reality of my life and different experiences, connecting with different public figures that you may know, and what that means astrologically. So let's look at the transits for the week. As we said before, we're highlighting the full moon in Leo and Mercury in Pisces. Those are the last two transits. The first two transits both involve Mercury and the sun, which of course the sun's involved in the full moon because the sun is fully reflecting, or the moon is fully reflecting the light of the sun. That's why it looks full. But the first transit of the week is Mercury completing its transit through Aquarius, forms a square, a tense aspect with Uranus in Taurus at 23 degrees. At 23 degrees in Taurus. This is from Sunday to Tuesday, February 9th to the 11th, with the exact square happening on February 10th. Now, the second transit of the week, we're going to talk about these two together because they're happening together, basically, is the sun in Aquarius forming a square with Uranus in Taurus. So Mercury in Aquarius is forming a square with Uranus in Taurus, and the sun in Aquarius is forming a square with Uranus in Taurus. Last week we talked about how these two planets were conjunct. They're still conjunct this week. The exact conjunction was last week, but Mercury passed the sun. But as it passed the sun, they're making alignments with other planets nearly simultaneously. And both of these aspects are very intense because Mercury in Aquarius is fixed air, Taurus is fixed earth. Uranus is in Taurus, the sun and Mercury are in Aquarius. The sun is light, life, and vitality. Mercury is consciousness, communication, coordination, the god of merchants and thieves, the messenger of the gods, guide of souls to the underworld. Uranus is the planet of revolution and the planetary ruler of Aquarius. So Uranus in Taurus is looking at these two planets, the sun and Mercury in Aquarius, and is like, what are you doing in my house? That's my sign. And Uranus is uncomfortable in Taurus because Taurus is that earth frequency, which is very stagnant, fixed earth. It's revolutionizing our self-worth, our values. The sun is squaring Uranus from Aquarius. The sun in Aquarius squaring Uranus in Taurus from Sunday to Thursday, with the exact square happening February 11th. What these aspects are doing is they're highlighting who you are within the group. And this plays into the full moon. We'll get to that in a minute, but who are you within the group? What is it about you that is unique that is unique? What makes you unique? What makes you different from everyone else? It's that individuality that is your asset. I feel like that was my greatest asset in working in publicity. I certainly was a fish out of water. I didn't really fit in there at all. But I feel like people appreciated me because I just was myself, or at least I tried to be. But who are you within the group? What makes you different from everyone else, and why are you a part of the groups that you're a part of? The squaring to Uranus in Taurus is helping us revolutionize our self-worth and values so that we can find greater cohesiveness within the group, where maybe we have to make some sacrifices for the benefit of the group. But in return, maybe the group has to make some sacrifices to benefit us. There's tension here in grounding into our individuality and then taking that individuality and assimilating it with the group. What's going on in your life right now with regards to group activities? Do you feel like an outsider? Do you feel like you don't fit in? Or maybe you feel like you're trying too hard to fit in. I certainly felt like I was trying too hard to fit in at times when I was working in publicity. There's Aquarius is the vibe keeper, and so when you're a part of a group, there's a vibration. Like when I was a part of the world of publicity, there was a frequency, there was a vibration. There's a vibration to Hollywood. And that vibration rattled me. It rattled me to the point where I had to insulate myself with drugs and alcohol. That was like, okay, something's not right here. This is not good for me. I shouldn't be doing this. That brought about the dysentery. So what is your frequency? And what is the tension between your frequency and the frequency of the group? It's like, I think of a symphony. Now, an orchestra doesn't have an electric guitar. Maybe an electric guitar could fit in an orchestra, but it also would maybe stand out too much. Sometimes there's strings in a rock and roll song or a hip hop song. Sometimes it works. Sometimes maybe it doesn't. I'm sure there's been rock stars or rappers or hip hop stars who have sung with an orchestra. Or like I even think of that, what's that song from the 70s? It's like the I'm trying to remember. Somebody knows what that song is, but it's like they take Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and they put it into a disco song, and it works. It works. So sometimes it can work, but sometimes it just might not work. Sometimes rock and roll doesn't go with classical music. And sometimes classical music doesn't go with rock and roll, or sometimes hip hop doesn't work with classical, or, jazz doesn't fit with rock. Sometimes it can blend together. Sometimes, yes. Country and rap can work together. It's been done. But that's what this is. There's some tension there. And so you're trying to figure out what your frequency is and how that can be enmeshed with the frequency of the group. And there's tension there. And that's what leads us to the full moon, because the full moon is going to help release that tension so that we can assimilate to the group. Now, of course, the new moon cycle classes are available for enrollment, where we will be covering the new moon in Virgo. No, the new moon in Pisces and the full moon in Virgo. See, I'm not going to edit that out. I make mistakes. I say the wrong thing sometimes. It's the new moon in Pisces and the full moon in Virgo. That's the next moon cycle class. If you want to learn how those lunar cycles are affecting you directly and how to work with that energy, if you want to learn more about the language of astrology, learn more about your astrological code, these classes are small, they're live, they're with me. We will get deep into who you are and what this new moon, full moon means for you in a class environment. You can enroll at theweeklytransit.com. But this full moon in Leo, the full moon is a release. It's a release in order for us to assimilate or to cultivate the seed that was planted during the new moon. And the seed that was planted during the new moon was the new moon in Aquarius, which was planting the seed in terms of who are you within the community? Setting your intentions to define your role within the community, to take responsibility for what you're meant to bring to the group dynamic, to hold the group accountable for what they're responsible for in exchange for what you're bringing the group. Now, the full moon in Leo is fixed fire. Aquarius is fixed air. They're both fixed. They're opposite each other. Leo's symbolized by the lion, the king of the jungle. It's ruled by the sun, the center of the solar system. It rules the heart. This is about releasing pride. Because as you are assimilating to the group, as you are honing in your frequency and working to assimilate your frequency to the group's frequency, you need to release your pride. I imagine that that's how a lot of these great songs, whether it's rap meets country or classical meets rock and roll, the way they're able to do it, jazz and rock or jazz and hip hop, is you gotta release some of the pride. If one tries to dominate the other, then it's not going to work. We can't have country dominating rap or rap dominating country if we want to meld them together. They've got to be integrated together. So there's got to be some pride that is released. And so when you think about yourself and these first two transits of Mercury and the Sun in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus, it's honing in on your frequency, gaining clarity of your frequency, and then gaining clarity of the frequency of the group and releasing the pride that needs to be released so that you can assimilate to the group. And that doesn't mean that you totally lose yourself in the group. You still are holding on to your independence because Aquarius is about independence. But I'm not trying to show up the group. I'm not trying to make it all about me. Hey, I showed up and now everyone in the group needs to change their tune to my tune. No, it's about we need to work together. That everybody here has something unique that they're bringing to the equation. And if anyone is trying to stand out above the rest, then it's not going to work. The full moon is Wednesday, February 12th at 5:54 a.m. Pacific time. So that would be 8:54 a.m. Eastern time. 5:54 a.m. Pacific, 8:54 a.m. Eastern, Wednesday, February 12th. The full moon in Leo at 24 degrees. 24 degrees. So Jessica Alba's moon is at 26 degrees Aquarius. That's going to be conjunct the sun. And the sun's transiting through her 6th house. And the moon is transiting through Jessica Alba's 12th house. So she is releasing the pride that exists within her unconscious. It's like the pride that maybe she wasn't even aware that she had, that she needs to release so that she can assimilate to the group in terms of her daily life and just be one of everyone, independent of everyone, but contributing in a way that is supportive of the group, just as the group is supporting her. So what is that for you? Where do you need to release some pride? Gain some humility, but maintain independence and individuality so that you can assimilate to the group. It's like an ingredient in like if there's too much garlic or if there's too much salt in a dish, and it's like, oh God, it's just overpowered. It ruins it. You need the right amount. If there's no salt, it's like, this is bland. But if there's too much salt, it's like, I can't eat this. So you got to find the right balance. We need to find, as individuals, the balance of our ingredient of salt that we're bringing to the collective dish. We don't want too much salt and we don't want too little. We need the right amount. So think of yourself as salt, and the group that you are assimilating with is the dish. You don't want to be non-existent, but you also don't want to be overpowering. And if you're overpowering, then you need to release some pride. Now on Thursday, February 14th is when Mercury transits into Pisces. Mercury is transiting through Pisces for a very short period of time, February 14th to March 3rd, just a couple weeks, just over 2 weeks. This is when you know that Mercury is cruising now. It's back at its normal pace, moving like 2 degrees every day, trucking. So it's going to be flying through the mutable water sign symbolized by the fish. The final sign of the Zodiac carries the weight of the 12 previous signs. Pisces rules the feet. The feet carry the weight of the entire body. Mercury is the planet of consciousness, and Pisces is the sign of the unconscious. So this is unconscious awareness, becoming aware of your unconscious. What is going on beneath the surface of your mind? We had a little break with the Pisces energy this last week, almost 2 2 weeks with only 2 planets in the North Node in Pisces. Because was it last Monday, the 3rd, is when Venus moved into Aries from Pisces. So we had just like Tuesday, like 10 days of just Saturn and Neptune and the North Node in Pisces. But that's over now because Mercury's moving through, and in 4 days the Sun's going to join, and now we're going to have 4 planets in the North Node in Pisces. So things are about to get heavy again. So what is weighing on your mind? You experience this full moon, you release your pride, and then maybe you go deep within yourself and you're like, oh man, yeah, I'm an obnoxious prick. I just spent an hour talking about myself and my experiences with Jessica Alba and Jessica Simpson. What an asshole. Man, nobody cares about that. I just need to talk about the astrology. Instead, I just monologued for an hour. No, Scott, you got to be compassionate with yourself. Somebody out there cares what you're saying. Somebody does. What you shared is benefiting somebody. It must. Let's hope. I have faith in a higher power. That's what Pisces is about. Faith that, whatever I'm communicating, there is a reason for it. There is a purpose. And any guilt, shame, regret, or blame that's rising to the surface of my mind, I need to show compassion. And I need to be empathetic to the other people that were involved. Yeah, empathetic. The empathy can help us release the anger, the hurt, the suffering. Jessica Alba was really sweet. I remember the last day that my last day of work, she met up with me for drinks at the Standard Hotel on Sunset Boulevard. She wished me well. And then, we kind of kept in touch a little bit, and she came to the first restaurant I worked at after I was in publicity. She came by the restaurant at least once or twice and said hi. Very kind. And then she fell off the map. And it's really hard when you feel like you're close to somebody. I mean, I've been in a lot of relationships with people where they're a part of your life and then they're not a part of your life. You're like, what happened? Did I do something? Did I say something? Was I not nice to them? You're overanalyzing your relationship and going through all the nuances, all the different experiences that you had with that individual and trying to figure out if you did something wrong. But it's especially tough when the person that you're thinking about in that way is famous and they're never fully out of your life because you're inevitably going to see them on a billboard or in a magazine or on the internet, or somebody's going to mention them, or you're walking through the grocery store and you see their products on the shelf and you think about conversations that you had regarding those products, and it's just like, it's a trip. So, in reflecting in those ways, it's about showing yourself compassion, that everything played out exactly as it was meant to, and having empathy for them, that they wanted to move on for whatever reason. Their life got busy and you weren't a part of it anymore. And that's okay. Really nice family too. Her parents were really nice. Her dad and I had a lot of great conversations. we really broed out together about sports and that kind of stuff. She's like, oh, my dad likes sports. You like sports. Go talk to him. So, yeah, even her mom and dad invited me over to their house with my girlfriend at the time after I had worked in publicity for dinner. Like, wow, super nice. So what's coming up for you in terms of the past? Because we didn't mention it this week, but Mars is still transiting through Cancer. So lots turning up in terms of your past. What's coming up in terms of your past? People from your past, are they coming into your view again? It's like, wow, this person, what's going on with them? Why don't I talk to them anymore? And then the thoughts come through with Mercury and Pisces, the guilt, the shame, the regret, the blame. Oh, I shouldn't have said this, or I should have said that. Really second guessing yourself. Just be mindful. February 14th, Valentine's Day. I mean, God, that day's a trigger point for a lot of people, especially if you're single and you used to not be single. Valentine's Day. Oh, great. This is a reminder that I'm single again. And I used to spend Valentine's Day with my former lover. And now they're not in my life anymore. So now this is just a nice reminder that romance didn't work out. Just get ready for your mind to be heavy during this period, February 14th to March 3rd. And if you feel that weight upon your mind, give yourself a break. Release the pride. Show yourself compassion. Be empathetic to those that were a part of your life that are no longer a part of your life, or those that are a part of your life that are annoying you, that are bothering you, that are frustrating you. Try to see things from their perspective. Try to be a little softer. The last time Mercury transited through Pisces, I'm going to give you the last 5 years. February 23rd to March 9th, 2024. March 2nd to the 18th, 2023, March 9th to the 27th, 2022, March 15th to April 3rd, 2021, and March 16th to April 11th, 2020. Look back through the photos, the Instagram posts, the emails, the texts, your calendar. What was going on in your life during these dates? That'll help give you some clues on what could be in store for you this time around as Mercury transits through Pisces. If you're a Gemini or a Sagittarius, or if you have key astrological points or planets in Gemini or Sagittarius, this might feel like your own personal Mercury retrograde. There might be a lot of tension around communication and coordination. Gemini wants to keep things light. Sagittarius wants to stay optimistic. And that Pisces frequency is going to weigh you down. It's going to make you go deep. Make you look at all the all the crumbs underneath the couch cushions. Oh God, that's still there? I wondered where that was. Time to throw that in the trash. So anyway, I hope this has all been helpful to you. I thank you for your time, your energy, for being with me on this journey and inviting me to be on this journey with you, to walk the path with you, so to speak, even if I'm not with you physically. I'm grateful to know that I'm here in your ear, and that hopefully what I'm sharing here is bringing a little levity to your life as I share my self-deprecating nature and my vulnerability with you, sharing some intimate parts of myself with you. I trust that that's the right thing for me to do because my North Node is in Scorpio and I need to be vulnerable. So I'm being vulnerable with you here, and I hope that my vulnerabilities are elevating you and supporting you and encouraging you and empowering you, and that everything that we're sharing here on the weekly transit is giving you the clarity that you need to navigate the week ahead. Thank you again for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the weekly transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any other transits may be affecting you, or if you're interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.